Hey, we're on the podcast now with Dave Proctor from Canada, author of the book Untethered. Dave, it's great to have you back on the MTA podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, guys.
We were talking a little off mic that we talked to you last time. It was just 2 weeks after you finished your Trans-Canadian world record run. And of course, that was really interesting for us to be able to read the book, kind of hear the entire blow by blow, plus your perspective now, like a year and a half after you finished, which I'm sure,
Mm.
has changed since we talked to you last time. So we're really excited about talking to you and digging into this.
Yeah, and thank you. And yeah, running across the country was hard, of course, but I consider writing this book to be even harder, right?
I was going to
Because
ask you that.
yeah, I mean, like you think about it, if I asked you guys to go run a marathon, you'd be like, yeah, I could do that. If I said, go, play the guitar and do the solo of November Rain, you'd be like, I don't know how to do that because I don't play the guitar. But so, I'm not a writer. I kind of had to figure it out along the way, and it was scary. But I'm
Mm.
super, super happy with the product and all the reviews that we're getting back. I'm so happy to kind of share, be able to share the story.
I think it really gives a great visceral look at what it takes physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, really to undertake such a huge endeavor. Like
Yeah.
it was
Hmm.
really gritty, which I think is powerful.
And
Thank you.
having read a lot of books about running and memoirs like this, I think it's hard to put people in the moment and make them feel the suffering, right?
Hmm.
But I'm definitely feeling it when when I
Well,
read your
that's
book.
great. Yeah, that was my
You did a
hope.
good
That
job.
was my hope. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it's ultimately Untethered is a walk through a day by day blow of all of the things that would happen in a 4,500 mile run. I know that sounds so stupid even to say that, but it's what it is it's a walkthrough, but not only the day by day happenings, but also these macro and micro concepts that you kind of bring into something like this, like the sports imagery and the the doubt and the within and kind of even the mental management of the voices in your head when you enter
Yes.
into a province and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be here for another 20 days. How do I manage that? And so I try to give a lot of the kind of tricks and tips that I've picked up over the last 2 decades of ultra marathoning to the audience because, hey, I would have loved to have read this before enduring that.
Hmm.
Would you have done it though if you'd read your own book?
Yeah,
You'd known.
probably not. Probably not. And so yeah, some people might say, hey, yeah, you're trying to scare people away from doing something like this.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
yeah,
You convinced me not to try it, Dave.
yeah,
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 I don't
yeah,
think
yeah,
you were.
absolutely,
I
absolutely.
wasn't in any
But I also
danger
think
trying
that
it.
well, yeah, and I can even say now after being done and now written a book about it is there's a saying that says your lows will be your highs, right? And sometimes when you're reading the book and you're like, whoa, okay, this is getting ugly. Those now I look back as my highs. You're like, wow, that was cool. It was
Hmm.
it I'm enduring comfort all the time here now. But sometimes when you're having like true discomfort, when you're in the middle of nowhere and it's either the weather or injury or whatever it is, you look back upon it now and those were your highs. It's pretty cool.
I remember you saying during our last conversation that, there's so much discomfort and just, the comforts were very few out there that, getting like a good cinnamon roll from like a small town bakery was just like,
Yeah.
fed your
Oh
soul
yeah.
and your body kind of.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and yeah, and it's what's really kind of cool about writing a book about this too is I had those feelings, but then circling back and kind of doing it in an artistic way, like writing a book, it starts making sense of a lot of the things that you're feeling and ideas and behaviors and actions that you took, and kind of creates a bit of a loop, right? And so like you bringing up Angie about the comforts. Yeah, it's absolutely true. It's there's that saying, desire makes slaves out of kings, whereas patience and discipline makes makes kings out of slaves. And, we desire so heavily the comforts of the world. Um, but, ultimately that makes us a slave to those comforts, where as you reading between the pages of Untethered, you can kind of see, I don't know, I kind of was a king out there. I felt like I was taking something. I felt like I was, um, like living my best life. I know that sounds so cliche,
Mm.
but I kind of was, and it's kind of cool to kind of share those stories, because then ultimately, wouldn't it be kind of cool for all of us to be leading our best lives this next year, at that next race, or even training for that next race, right?
I remember you saying that you kinda had to put things into a vault because, almost like everything else had to fall away. You could only control, your next steps, what you were eating, like how you're taking care of your body, like all those other kind of pressures, the things in life that we, being on hold with customer service, like all those things had to go away and you had to like just put yourself in the moment.
Including your foot, which
Right from
bothered you
Yeah,
almost the whole way. Just that wasn't allowed in the vault when you're out there running.
right, right. But you had to open up that vault at night, because you can't disregard it always, right?
Yeah.
You have to open it up at times, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So there's times to be, processing things emotionally and feeling your feelings. I remember you were really good about pointing that out, but then, basically it was your job to run and to set this record. And so I'm wondering, like you had to be like so in the moment when you were out on the road. How much did you have to rely on the memory of other people, like your crew members, your crew chief, Lana Ray? Like how much did you have to, ask them questions about their impressions, to include in the book?
Yeah, I was wondering that too. Did you dictate while you're going, or how did you reconstruct these memories?
Well, yeah, I think many ways. Like you're right. Number one, I dictated along the way. So at about 95 or 100 kilometers into every day's run, about 60 miles in, I would, um, I would speak into my phone, and there's amazing dictation software out there now that you can end up speaking, and it records it, so it's like a journal. Now, of course, every once in a while, when a big transport truck drives by, it says you say something where I said something completely different. And you're like, okay, I kind of I understand the gist of that. But then, the most amazing thing too was that, when you end up printing off all of that, that journal and reading it lays out this incredible groundwork. Like you remember every little specific thing, and that kind of brings you back. Then further, before writing the book and doing the formatting, yeah, I sat down with all my crew members and kind of went over, because it wasn't necessarily my point of view that I was wanting to get across as well too. It was also my crew members' point of view, because as I was running, they were parked up ahead on the side of the road awaiting me. I had a recollection of what I said and how I acted, but ultimately they played such a major role with, because they saw it and they were like, well, no, not necessarily this, because you were doing that, or you said this, or you responded in this way. And yeah, it's really kind of cool to then take all those influences and come up with kind of the real storyline. I remember years ago listening to a podcast. It was Malcolm Gladwell's podcast. And, he said the longer time that goes on after something happens. I remember they were doing a flashbulb study about 9/11, and they were asking people, where were you and what were you doing and how did you on 9/11? And it's amazing over time, our stories start to become different. And
Hmm.
so I think months after getting this run done, um, I got to work on the book, because I wanted to make sure it was as, accurately representative of this run. And I think I nailed it. Furthermore to that, there will be a documentary that's going to be coming out here in the next many months. There was a documentary film crew that was following me along, and I haven't seen anything. So it's an independent film. I don't know
Wow.
how she's going to portray me. If I'm going to be like, I don't know, if I'm going to be moody or bossy or whatever. I'm going to be unattractive. I'll tell you that, because I didn't shave for like 2 months and stuff. But
Food in your beard.
yeah, exactly. All these gels and everything in my beard. But yeah, no, I think it was accurate. Based upon the way that I recollected all the memories. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting. There's one chapter contributed by Lana Ray, your crew chief and girlfriend. And I think this was about the time you'd already run all the way across the country. You were in Alberta, and she met up with you again, and you were just a skeleton of yourself, right? You'd been out on the road so long and were so weathered and leathery and had lost so much weight and gristly. And she described just your appearance and how long it would take you to walk like from the bed to the bathroom after running 105 kilometers or 108 kilometers.
Totally.
That was an interesting chapter to like get that other perspective and be like, oh, wow. Yeah, this guy he's really rough shape out there.
Oh yeah, no doubt. And I think I think it's the best chapter of the entire book, because it's honest. It paints the other side of the picture. Yeah, she even said, yeah, don't believe everything he said when I leapt out of the vehicle. No, it took me this long in order to get out, and and I think what she said was, it's the man that she left in Ontario was a very different man. Now he was a lot leaner. Yeah, I think she said I look like a frayed Q-tip, right? Which is, that's the most complimentary thing a woman can say about a guy. It's like hugging a sack of trekking poles. I think she said. So like that's, hey, that makes me feel pretty sexy. Yeah, but I think it's a brilliant chapter because it gives perspective, and.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the ultimate perspective because she was there living it from a very different point of view. The reason why I kind of did that, and I asked her to write the chapter, was Scott Jurick's book, North. His wife, Jenny, ended up going back and forth, and they kept kind of doing chapters back and forth. And I thought that was such an exceptional way to tell the story. And I got so much out of it, and I know a lot of other people did too.
Definitely. I got to meet Scott last year. He's a cool guy in person.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
And I don't know if you heard, but Mike Wardian, who's also mentioned in the book, he's going to try an Appalachian Trail record this year.
Yeah, we saw that coming. Yeah, like I think that he really enjoyed, the run across America and the kind of these multi-week runs. He set forth. He said, "Hey, I'm totally doing this for charity. I'm going to do this many miles a day. I think it was close to 50 miles." Which gave him a lot of time to go and do the fundraising and all the things that were necessary. But yeah, no, totally saw that coming. Like, the guy doesn't have an end. He's eager and interested. Oh, he's awesome. So I'm so excited for him to make a go at that.
Another inspiring ultra runner we've had on the podcast, I wonder if you could share some thoughts about, is Pete Kostelnick. He's in the book quite a bit and wrote forward, I believe, in the book. And so we talked to Pete right after he ran from Alaska to Florida. Self-supportive. So what are your thoughts on what Pete has done?
Oh, I think we need an entire hour-long podcast to talk about Pete, because like there's a saying that says you should never meet your heroes because we lift them up to be something that really they're not. That's not true. When I met Pete, and Pete now and I are great friends, which is so weird to think that your hero is your friend, and in fact he looks up to you, which is weird. His Trans-American speed record, 42 days. It's the greatest record in the world, I think. He's incredible. He's an absolutely incredible human being. And
why would you say that you believe that record is the greatest?
I think that he traveled I'm a Canadian, so in kilometers, 115 kilometers a day for 42 days in a row. That mileage, of that many kilometers a day or miles a day um, is astounding. So it's almost like we all know that, well, we don't all know, and we can have this debate that I think the marathon is the hardest distance to run
Hmm.
fast. Like it's 42.2 or 26 miles is just, it's brutal. Um, and, I think that the distance in America, from San Francisco to New York City, is kind of perfectly terrible, where you have to go fast, but you also have to go long, and his 42 days it sends shivers up my spine.
Hmm.
So, as much as people say, hey, Canada being, the widest area of this continent is brutal. Yeah, you know what? You shorten something up like a marathon. I know it sounds stupid, shorten it up like a marathon, but 26 miles, run fast enough will make you find Jesus pretty quick. Yeah. So yeah,
Huh.
Pete's approach to America and his summer going and doing that, it was spectacular. And I
Hmm.
I can't imagine anybody. I can imagine one person right now breaking it. But it was truly remarkable.
Hmm. And then I was thinking too, how hard it is to do something like what you did with figuring out the logistics and having the crew is just invaluable people to stay on top of stuff so you can just
Mm,
focus on the running. And but this dude ran self-supported from Alaska, like pushing all the stuff in a stroller. I mean, it's just nuts.
that's nuts. And he was also covering like a significant distance a day, like 50 miles most days. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, yeah, if he was covering a shorter distance and was, hanging out with locals and eating pancakes at the local bakery, that's cool. Hey, but he wasn't. And so, yeah, he went after the Trans-American Speed Record. I think that his key to key run, Alaska down to Florida. I think that was also a finding yourself
Mm.
trip for him, and that's cool. Like sometimes you compete, and then sometimes you um, look after your soul. And I think
Mm.
that was a year of him looking after his soul in a way that other people are like, oh my goodness, I couldn't even possibly imagine. He was out there and he was having a good time. And, I think that we all need those. Yeah, go train hard for a marathon, but then go on that really cool backpacking trip with the family. Like there's a time for both, I think. Yeah.
Speaking of these runners, I think everyone should know about the great Canadian runners, Terry Fox
Hmm.
and Al Howie, the guy that had the record before you broke it. So can you
Mm-hmm.
just briefly tell our listeners who these Canadian runners are?
Well, let's start with with Terry Fox. Now Terry is, if you ask any Canadian, he is the hero. He's the Canadian icon. Um, Terry Fox, lost one leg to cancer at a very, very young age. And at the age of 19 years old, he ran a marathon with a prosthetic leg. And back in 1980, you got to remember that looked like a baseball bat, kind of duct taped to his leg. That was insane, right?
Yeah.
But he ran a marathon with that, and then he said, "Hey, I can do this. I'm going to do this every day across the country, and I want to raise $1 for every Canadian." And at the time, our population was 27 million people in the country. And so we wanted to raise $27 million. And he created a
Wow.
movement. People just stopped what they were doing and everything was Terry Fox. And he kind of showed us what determination and will can do, just showing up. And so in Canada, every child, when they go to school, they go and do the Terry Fox run every year.
Mm.
And they raise money for cancer, the Canadian Cancer Foundation. And ever since 1980, when Terry Fox did the run across Canada, we've now, the Canadian Cancer Foundation, the Terry Fox Foundation, has raised just under $900 million. So
Wow.
Wow.
now, of course, as well too, Terry um, ended up passing away during that run across Canada. He was close to Thunder Bay, uh, almost halfway, just over halfway through, and the cancer came back, and he passed away not long thereafter. So, um, yeah, we'll always remember Terry, but he'll always, leave. He keeps a big place in a lot of people's hearts, and that's mine as well too.
Yeah.
Al Howie is an absolute running legend. When I started running ultramarathons like 19 years ago, I heard about this guy, and he ran across Canada and 100 kilometers a day for 72 days in a row. And just, like, who does this? He would routinely run from one city to the next, win the marathon, and run home. Like, that was his thing. That's what he did. And you're like, who is this guy? And so all throughout my running career, I was thinking like, yeah, I ran 100 kilometers, or yeah, I ran 100 miles, or ran 200 miles, but I didn't run 100 kilometers a day for 72 days in a row. Like, that's a mythical. And so I think over the years, I thought, maybe I could do this. And so that was like 15 years ago. And, I'm absolutely honored, and I'm very thankful that people like him did this so that people like me can dream, and my hope is that, somebody who's listening to this podcast right now is going, might not be like 6 months of work or 2 blocks of training, or, might not even be a year, but might be a decade away. But, if you just start to chip away at those little pieces, fine tuning yourself, making yourself 1% better every day. Yeah, maybe I can run across America. Maybe I can run across Canada, Australia, maybe not Russia right now, because that's a
No.
different story. That's a different podcast altogether. Yeah.
There'll be some tough logistics.
I would say, yeah.
I thought about running across Maryland. We're in Pennsylvania. Maryland's just real close to the Maryland line.
Yeah.
But only the skinny part. That's like 2 miles across.
Yeah. You could go after the fat part or the skinny part. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe the skinny part now, maybe the fat part later. How about that?
Got to start somewhere.
Got to start somewhere.
Oh. Well, you kind of, talk about in the book, like it was almost like this whole process is like three different journeys. There was, the preparation to even starting your run, including, when you tried in 2018 and had to pull out due to injury, and, your mindset, your process in 2018 and how that differed from 2022, and kind of realizing that you had to do it for you this time. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit, because as amazing as it is to do something for charity, and that's a huge part of many people's journeys, it's not selfish to do it for ourselves either.
Yeah, and I think we need to have that conversation, right? Because and that's the way I kind of positioned the book as well too. I start right into Newfoundland. I start right into the run in 2022. And then the next chapter is going through, the run in 2018 where I failed. And it was a very different run. So you could then easily compare the two runs. And the biggest thing was that the second run was ultimately for myself, by myself. And I shouldn't say by myself, definitely incredible crew members, but it was pared down by like 99%. And that's okay. And in fact, it wasn't just okay. I found out after a while, like a number of weeks of being out there running, that it was actually kind of nice that I was out there running for me. So I got up in the morning, and it's not that I needed to run. It's that I got to run. I had the opportunity to run. And sometimes, you feel like even in training, you think, if I need to do something, that's a lot harder to do than I want to do something. I need to make this meal for my partner versus I want to make this meal for my partner. Such a significant difference. And getting out of bed in the morning on day 35 after running, a gazillion miles, it felt good to go, hey, when I swing my legs out of bed, I'm doing this for me. 10 miles into the day, the next 10 miles, that's for me too. And, I've stopped. I felt for a while that I always had to give people a reason of why, and give them, and even apologize a little bit, because people say, "Oh, hey, what did you run for?" Well, I ran for myself. it's kind of awkward silence, right? Well, what about cancer? What about, children's, this and that? And you know what? You're absolutely right. And those campaigns have a purpose as well too. And I would love nothing more than to go out and do more rare disease work, or doing work with Mito Canada, or whatever it is. But I think a big part of the success, especially now circling back and really, completing my thoughts after writing a book. Um, yeah, you know what? You're enough. You are worthy of whatever you're going through. And if you can feel like you're worthy of whatever you're going through, you can go through it. I just think that's so true.
Some people don't feel like they're worthy of the suffering they're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, and I think I quoted in the book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, where he, I forget the quote exactly, but his greatest fear was that he would become abundantly aware that he was not worthy of his own level of suffering.
Yeah.
And now, of course, people who haven't read the book, he survived the Holocaust as a Jewish war prisoner. And so, of course, you and me, we would quit in the middle of a run or a race, and the world wouldn't end. He quits and he dies. When you're not worthy of whatever you're going through, you will quit. And quitting looks differently. But you're absolutely right. I think that a lot of people don't really feel that they're worthy of suffering. But I think we all are. And there's nothing better feeling in the world than coming out the other side and standing tall, even after getting off the ground for 10 minutes because you can't breathe.
Is there a reason why you switched directions this time?
No. Yes and no. Yeah, I started off on the other side last time, so I'll start off on this side this time. I think I don't mean to say it's going to be that simple of an answer, but I think it is. I wanted to experience it in a different way. Even the parts that I ran the time before, I only got 1/3 of the way across. But I wanted to experience it looking a different way. I also wanted to kind of experience it in the way that Terry Fox experienced it.
Yeah.
I wanted to start where he started. I wanted to run the roads that he ran, because I feel like I was very lonely out there a lot of the time, like you're running on your own. But the coolest thing is you're never really ever truly alone. You're running with ghosts that have been there before, and they've suffered and they felt the same feelings, the same feelings that you felt where you're feeling them right now. And I think that's kind of rad. Terry Fox did this back in 1980. That's the year I was born. But he's still very, very much alive.
So it felt like his spirit was with you the whole time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially until, when he took his last steps, the last many days. But I also had the privilege of connecting with Terry Fox's brother, Fred Fox, on the phone, and we had a really good, lengthy conversation about brothers. My brother was out there crewing me at the time, and me and my brother were kind of at one another. We were just endlessly frustrated with one another, and other crew members. You say, "Hey, can I get more, hummus in that next sandwich or whatever?" They're like, "Yeah, I got you." You say that to your brother. All of a sudden, he reverts back to when he was 9 years old, and you were 7 years old, and you're being a jerk, and he's being a entitled bastard, and like it's weird. It's like, okay, why are we fighting about this? This is stupid.
And you pointed out
And
that your brother isn't a distance runner either, so he didn't really
right.
understand the perspective that you were coming from.
Yeah, no doubt, exactly. And I think that he yeah, and I think he tried his best. He really did. But yeah, he missed the mark on a number of points, and I was trying to get him on board, and I was trying to educate him out there. But honestly, he just didn't have the energy to go there. And so, yeah, all through the book, you sense this frustration between Ottawa and Thunder Bay, where he was crewing me, which is the hardest part of Canada. It's the hilliest. It's the most remote. And yeah, he and I were saber rattling out there. He was being the big brother, and I was being the brother out there doing the thing, and it was awkward at times, but I think you picked that up in between the pages for sure.
And that whole area is full of lakes. So would you say that it was probably the most mosquito filled?
Oh, that was insane. Yeah, that and anything, yeah, that in Manitoba, just west of there as well too, and they're huge. Like
Mm.
it's amazing. Their size, there's a size. No, they're not the size of birds, but they're not far off. And it's amazing when you're running and you look back behind you and you just see this massive cloud of bugs, and you just think, I really hope I don't have to scratch my leg or something, because they're on you.
Mm.
Yeah, it's incredible. And but that whole area along Lake Superior just truly is superior. It's a monstrous body of water, and you don't quite know it until you're running across it, and 7 days later you're still running across it. Um, but
Mm.
it's yeah, the bugs in there were unreal.
I'd like to have you talk about some of the mindset that you needed and the mental strategies you used as you ran across Canada. So let's just give people an idea of how things kind of got off to a rough start back in the Atlantic provinces, and then how did you deal with that as you're going across the continent?
Yeah, I think that there's always things, no matter what. Like you think about running a marathon, you're gonna have a thing or two come up. But what if you run two and a half of them a day, and then 7 days a week, and 67 days of those back to back to back? Um, yeah, and it started off rocky, to say the least. On day one, I started feeling a tickle in my throat, and yeah, I got COVID, and that sucked. That was not
Mm.
fun. And so, ultimately, right away, you had to kind of suspend your bias. Everything you read in the news says you can't exercise through COVID. Um, so I just said, you know what? I'll take it day by day. If I can't, then I won't. Then I'll stop. I'll circle back and I'll try it again. Um, but let's see how this goes. So, you have to kind of also accept your current state. And so there's a number of little mindset, little bits here and there when it comes to that. I think that too, we always look for comfort. We're always looking for comfort, and the comfort that you understand and know is the comfort that you remember. Um, so let's say 3 days in, and you're really uncomfortable running with COVID, and you've been running for, almost, 230 miles at this point. Um, you still remember what it's like to be sitting on your sofa the day before you started. But on day 45, you don't remember what comfort feels like. So you're like, well, this is this, right? Like
Wow.
this is this is this. And so, yeah, getting through that first week with COVID was just ugly, to say the least.
Mm.
But then, I got onto the mainland of Canada, 9 days across, Newfoundland. And quite early on, because of the embankment in the road, I ended up, fracturing my foot. And that was a really ugly, difficult piece where um, I still had over 6,000 kilometers left to run, and yet I'm feeling broken. I'm feeling my navicular is fractured, and in fact, it was. We circled back at the end, and it was with MRIs.
Mm.
And so, how do you mentally manage this? And I just said the phrase as well too. This is the most
That was one
powerful
of the most
phrase.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh,
like that.
is that what
I
you
That
thought
under
as
stuck
well
out to
too?
me too. I have thought
Yeah,
about it multiple times this week since I read that because there are so many situations that applies to. There's obviously there's chosen suffering. You sign
yeah,
up for a race, you do a challenge like, you're talking about, but everyone listening has unchosen suffering, and sometimes it
right.
feels like this current hardness is going to stretch on forever. It's hard to feel hope in the midst of that, and I think that statement, this is so
Right.
powerful.
Yeah, and I remember, talking to my sports psychologist while I was running out there, and we talked about this, and that's exactly what she said, Dave. This is this, and she said, there's so much power in understanding that you can accept this. Of course, we don't want to accept it. That's, of course, right? But so much is wasted. So much is wasted in wanting something to be different than really kind of what it is. And
Mm.
so, hey, yeah, my foot is broken. Um, can I run on it? Yes. Does it hurt? Yes. can I accept it? And can I suspend my wanting this to be any different for the next 50 some odd days? Um, yeah, I think I could do that because this goal is bigger than that. And so, that saying this is this is so, it's so beautiful, and it's so all encompassing, because you could tuck that aside and say, well, yeah, it is what it is. It's not going to be any different until I stop, and then I can heal, but I'm not going to stop until I get to Victoria. So I'm just going to have to accept this and accept it for being it and not anything different. And I think there's so much suffering that takes place with us wanting something to be different than really truly what it is.
Hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Another fascinating kind of part that you brought out was kind of relating different parts of your being to four different animals.
Hmm.
And, that was just really fascinating. I was thinking, like, maybe other people relate to different animals, but it would be really cool if you could kind of share those voices, those parts of you, um,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
personified by animals.
Yeah, it's I don't know. At the beginning of when I kind of came up with this, I thought this was so stupid, and I thought, this is, like, I don't know, what am I thinking, right? And this was about like 9 years ago or so. I was my kids were younger. My oldest is now 18, but my kids were younger, and I was reading a lot of storybooks to them, like Winnie the Pooh, right? And now Winnie the Pooh is so rad, because you got Piglet, and you got Tigger, and you got Eeyore, and you got all the characters. And if you really think about it, they just personify feelings, emotions,
Hmm.
thoughts, ideas. But we put so much attention on children, on better understanding and identifying their thoughts and feelings and ideas and mental health. But yet, when we're running, I don't know about you guys, but it's a hot mess of a lot of thoughts and feelings and ideas, and everything gets either catapulted out of out of the stratosphere, or remains kind of buried deep inside. And neither one of those things are effective, and they do not yield positive results when it comes to execution on race day. So what I've done is I've I've identified four category or four animals that are always with me when I run. And my number one guy is my salamander. Um, he is prolific. He's the only of my four with a name, and his name's Emilio. And he is pasted on my left brain and between my skull and my brain. And he always, always, always talks, and he doesn't talk nicely. Um, and he tells me that, I should quit, I should stop. What are you thinking? You're fat, you're lazy, you're stupid. Nobody likes you, you're unattractive, all the things, all of the things. He tells me to go get a second bowl of ice cream. And he's always that guy that, gets in my head right away in the morning when my alarm goes off and I hit snooze, right? He's the guy that makes me hit snooze. But he never stops, and I've come to understand that he will never stop. Like he will always be there. He's present all the time until the day I die. And he was there right when I was born, and he's going to be there until the day I die. But I find that the best
Slippery,
way to
slippery
kind of,
little guy, isn't he?
yeah, he's kind of like, you can almost imagine him. He's kind of like wormy and squirmy, and like he's got a voice of Danny DeVito, if that helps. Like, yeah, he's got that voice, right? Yeah, so the best way to kind of, you can't ever get rid of them. You just look somewhere else, pay attention to a different voice. And so it's not even a voice. My eagle never ever says anything. He's just there. And when you look up at an eagle, yeah, so my other eagle is, he's way above my head, and he is always facing in the direction that I'm running in. And whenever I look up at him, I don't know, I see he's in control. He sees something up there that I can't see from where I'm standing down on the earth. That's worthwhile going and getting. And so he's stoic, he's resourceful, he's wise, and like those rustic cowboys, that they don't even have to say anything. They just give you that look, and you're like, oh yeah, I see you. They're so wise. And so, yeah, so he's always flying well above my head. And then of course, you got your coyote. and my coyote's always in the ditch beside me or in the trail behind me or whatever. And my coyote bites a lot, and he bites my legs and he takes chunks out of my flesh, and he's bitten me thousands and thousands of times all my life, but yet I'm still here. And every time you get bit, you think, oh, okay, this is the one that's going to kill me. It doesn't kill you, it just hurts, right? It's your relationship with pain, right? And my coyote, he doesn't respect me much. He does not think much of me. I'm just a meal for him, but he does pay attention and make eye contact with, the big black fire breathing dragon way up in the sky doing figure eights in the distance, because he is ominous, in control, capable, powerful, beautiful. He's just everything that you would ever want in a leader, in anything. You oh my goodness, wouldn't it be amazing to be him? So long story short, I am him. That is me in the distance. That's I am the dragon. I am strong. I'm capable. I'm all of those things, and just uncomfortable being those things, right? And so I look up upon him sometimes not only as, hey, that's the beacon of strength, but that I am strong. And it's a reminder that you can do hard things, and that you can not listen to that salamander, and you can ignore that dragon, because you're strong and capable.
And sometimes you just have to tether yourself. I remember you saying to your
Yes.
dragon, let him tow you,
Oh
forward.
yeah, and that's a part of the book, and that's why the book was supposed to be called Outrunner, because outrun rare, and but at the last minute I changed it to Untethered, because we seem to think that our tethers are the things that keep us down, like that limit our, and let's face it, Emilio, your salamander, he tethers you. That voice in your head tethers you, like it just does, right? But we never really ever think about tethering to a greater power, to a greater source, and seeing that dragon. And I know with my run across Canada, I envisioned this long rope, a long tether coming out from my chest that extended up in front of me and up into the sky, and the dragon would take a hold of it and give me a tow. He would give me a ride when times got hard, or when I was running up mountains, or I was at the end of my days, or and you can tether to a greater part of yourself. It's not just about being tethered down, but are we really ultimately at times tethering up?
Yeah, it's a beautiful metaphor. You introduce those characters in the beginning, and then they kind of reoccur throughout. And as you're going over the Canadian Rockies, you're tethered to the dragon, and he's pulling you and dragging you up. And then at the end, you realize you are the dragon.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert, right? Yeah, you're untethered. Because
exactly.
Spoiler alert, right? But the final day, like, yeah, let's just go there. I looked around, and there were no animals. There was no Danny DeVito voice in my head. There was no pain. Like, there was no bites. I was looking around for that coyote. He wasn't there. You get so often you look around for them. The eagle, there was really no point, right? And the dragon wasn't there, because ultimately he was you. So if you were tethering to him, you were therefore untethered. You, at that point, for a short period of time, I felt invincible. And I can't tell you, how wonderful of a feeling that is, even for a brief period of time in one's life, in one day, for the rest of your life. I will always feel that, and I will never, ever let go of that feeling ever again, of feeling untethered.
And I think you said in the book that that feeling gave you so much buoyancy that you just wanted to keep going. Like you had reached the end goal.
Mile zero.
You were exhausted. You were, lost 18 pounds and, had a broken foot. You needed to recover, but still that your soul had just expanded to the point where you were like, I want to maintain this feeling.
Yeah, you thought about turning around and doing it again the opposite way.
Oh, and that's absolutely true. There was a point in time where I was running across Vancouver Island at the end, and it was a 35 kilometer, 20 a 22-mile run. And, I got thinking, I'm like, when I stop this run in a matter of hours, I will never feel this good ever again in my life. I know that, right? I'm not running across Russia or circumnavigating the moon. It's not going to happen. And it kind of got me sad. I got thinking that, like, I don't ever want to not feel like this again. Like, no, I like this. I want this. And in fact, I started feeling like I needed it. So I convinced myself that I wasn't going to tell anybody. I was going to just circle around the monument and run away. And all the media was going to be like, what the heck? But then very quickly you start thinking, well, I think that's kind of how meth addicts feel.
Right.
Yeah. And, afraid of the come down is real. I think I'm addicted to coffee, but that's about it. Probably addicted to running. Let's face it. Probably a lot of you listeners on the podcast as well too are addicted to running and exercise. That's a dopamine dump unto itself. But but of course you quickly realize I've got children, I've got a life to get back to, I've got responsibilities, and I want to make the choice to not actively be that person that's chasing that dragon, no pun intended.
And would you say like that third aspect was the most challenging part of the journey, of where you had to, your body really had to re-regulate your serotonin levels because you had been really chasing that dopamine high for days and days and days. Your body had acclimated to it. I think you talked about the book Dopamine Nation, which is an excellent read. And you were really honest about what the aftermath was like for you. So maybe go into that a little bit.
Yeah, this might be relevant to anyone who's felt post-race blues, which is a real thing that marathoners feel.
Absolutely. And, a lot of my friends guys like Pete, told me, hey, brace for impact. And I don't know. I don't know if I didn't believe him or I just didn't want to believe him.
You're an optimistic guy. You're like, how bad could it be?
how bad could it? I just ran across the country. Like, how hard could it be? But so did he. So, I can't exactly tell you, in the book, I do my best to explain it. I think it was multifaceted. I think that coming down off of a high, there is that dopamine deficit that takes place. And the best way I kind of explained it is every province I ran across, I felt higher and higher and higher. As much as I felt broken, like my body and my legs, I felt broken, but I also felt good. In fact, not only good, but I felt amazing. And I explained it in the book that there was almost like a doctor that was coming in, sneaking into my hotel room at night, injecting me with these feel good, endorphins that made you just motivated and driven and happy. And you got so much of it. I can't imagine how much dopamine was going through my system. And then the day that you stop, he doesn't show up. And, and it didn't really feel bad right away. I felt kind of relieved, like, hey, I don't need to run tomorrow. This is great. I get to go to Starbucks and grab a coffee. But after many days, and as well too, I was in an air cast for the better part of 2.5 months.
So you didn't have access to your drug.
No, I could not exercise. And I was on the rowing machine.
I'm still hung up on the fact that you didn't go to Tim Hortons to get a coffee.
I know. Yeah. I'm one of these Canadians who's like, you know what? Tim Hortons is actually just not very good. Like, I'm sorry, Tim, it's yeah, I do prefer Starbucks. But, I think that over the next many weeks, I started feeling, the best word I could use is empty. I felt void of feeling good, and I would eat food. I would kiss my girlfriend. I would hug my kids. And I know it sounds stupid, but I didn't feel a damn thing. And I was like eager to feel something. And boy, after a period of time, I was talking to my psychologist and talking about thoughts and feelings and ideas. And I was busy blaming a lot of people in my life, and I was busy kind of acting out. Um, the acting out sessions got worse. The blame got worse. Um, and it got worse to a point where, um, and I talked about in my book where I considered taking my life. It was ugly. And um, I knew enough to know that I got a lot to live for and that I needed to go get some support and help. And so I ended up at the hospital. And that was the beginning of all the drugs, all the antidepressants. And it was hard. And it wasn't, hey, take an antidepressant and you're good. No, it's not that way. And the damage was continually happening. And I was harming relationships and acting out in ways that I'm very embarrassed. I wrote this book and I was thinking, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to write it organically and I'm going to get to a point and I'm not going to include that because it's kind of embarrassing, But I also think I wrote the book very honestly about the good and the bad.
Yeah.
It's very forthcoming. And so, hell, you know what? Let's just do it. And I sent it to the editor. And I also sent it to guys like Pete and Lazarus Lake and on and so forth. And they said, keep it in there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is important because the lows after the highs are real. And this is when you need support. And we also need to educate the people around us to know that those high achievers, those people who are going after things, bear with them. They'll be back, right? They're coming back. And so, it was a long year after the fact. I think I even alluded to the hardest part of this run was not the run itself. It was the recovery after the run. And I'm glad I wrote it. I've been getting incredible responses from people. I feel like when you open up, others open up, and it just creates a beautiful world where we're like, hey, yeah, me too. I totally get it. But I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want to admit that I was weak or that I was broken or wrong or whatever you want to call it. And you're none of those. Like, nobody's any of those at any one time. But, I think that sometimes people will look up to people like me who do these things. But I think that we need to be honest with the community and say, yeah, you know what? As strong as I was teetering on the other side as well, too.
Yeah. And I think people are going to really relate to that, when there are highs, there are going to be lows. Even, like you said, the strongest, most motivated, positive people can go through that. And it's not a weakness. And, just by sharing your story, I think it's really going to give people hope that there is something on the other side, that whatever they're going through right now, this is this. To seek resources, to talk to people, to get the help that they need. Because, ultimately there are going to be things in life that, you can't do on your own, really. We're not meant to interact and live on this earth by ourselves. And that's not the healthiest way to operate. So I think that's really important.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
How you doing now, Dave?
I'm great. I also think though too that, part of my healing from coming off of that year was, thank God I was writing a book. I'm not an artistic guy, right? I don't play the piano. I don't sing. I don't paint. But I also thought that I couldn't because I just don't have that gene. I'm not, but I'm now a writer, and I feel that putting your thoughts and feelings on paper when it comes to connecting the dots with what happened over that last year, and also being honest with the world, then therefore I can be honest with myself. I feel the best part of my healing over the last year was writing this book. So hey, I hate to say it to all you listeners out there, this book is not for you. This book was for me. And it was so, I'm so happy that I've completed it, that it's out there, and that hopefully, and the most wonderful thing. Sorry, I'm just jumping here now, but is when I end up getting private messages on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, from people who are reading the book all over the world. And it's like, since I'm opening up, they're opening up. And I want to tell you that I'll read every single message that comes in, because, oh, like, there's nothing better in the world than knowing that your message has landed with people in a positive way. So if anybody wants to send me a message, please, thank you. And it's such an honor to receive that from you.
Yeah, that's cool, man. It's not a lot of authors do that. So everyone, check out Run Proctor on Instagram. And how do you like to get messages if we want to direct people somewhere?
Oh yeah. Instagram is a perfect place. I might not check them every day, but yeah, it's such a means for communication back and forth, and yeah, private messages. I always find that that's the most, on Instagram, you're going to see photoshopped stuff and you're going to see the best parts of me, but yeah, privately, yeah, let's just all be real.
Love that.
So everybody, check out the book Untethered, the comeback story of one of the longest, fastest runs in history by Dave Proctor. Check out Dave also on Instagram at Run Proctor. And it sounds like you have a documentary coming out. That's going to be exciting. I look forward to seeing that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I haven't seen a thing, so I don't know how she's going to portray me. I might be grumpy and a jerk, or it might be, I don't know. But
well,
I know she's read the book.
Being honest in your book, so
yeah.
She will portray what was, from the perspective of her eye and the camera. So
no question. If she portrays a guy who looks like a pack of trekking poles and
with a
the way that Lana kind of explained, then hey, you know what? I can't argue. It is what it is. Yeah.
That's great.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing your story with us. I know a lot of people are going to find this inspiring, and I just love the mindset that you have, David. And it's been a great read. You're a great writer, and looking forward to seeing what's next. And you're always welcome to come back on the show.
Yeah, I'll be back soon. Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, guys.
Thank you.